Hey, everybody. Clyde, Happy New Year.
On January the 8th. Is it within the Larry David rules of Happy New Year
pull
engagement?
Jacob, pull up the Larry David rules and see whether we violated them or not. Did you know Priest Patrick, after he would give January 3rd.
3 days.
That's the absolute. So we have violated the Larry David rule. Some people in that episode said you could go a week. I feel like you can go a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Particularly kind of like the first time you see someone. Did you know this? Priest Patrick, gives the sermon and then always does kind of the announcements of what's going on in the church. And he always said he needed walk-up music for that. So the band used to play the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song for him to walk up and
what is the name of that song?
I do not know.
Frolic. Yeah.
There we go. Well, welcome, Clyde. I think today it will be kind of year-in review, scorecard, holy crap, what's going on in Venezuela type stuff. So, Mark, where do you want to kick us off?
Let's take a look at the one-year chart of WTI prices.
And this actually surprised me when we were looking at this morning. I mean, I guess I have lived this year, but
came into the year at 70.
And I would have sworn we were at 60, but maybe I didn't start paying attention till April, kind of when we were flirting around with the 50s.
And so that first air pocket was on the heels of something we talked about right after the administration was inaugurated, or Trump was inaugurated, his investment swing to the Middle East,
right,
where we conjectured that there might be some other off the program meetings with OPEC leadership.
Yeah,
I still stand by that conjecture, and we had a big acceleration of the cut restoration. And then we end the year, or begin this year, with another move that has got at least a lot of headline pressure on crude prices. But at this point last year, did many E&Ps think they were going to be budgeting on a 5-handle?
I don't think so. I felt like coming into the year, there was what I will say is kind of false optimism. You heard me say it on the podcast, and I think you kind of agreed with me, and Kirk agreed with me, that Trump's just a low oil price guy.
We've been saying that for years.
At his core, that's what he is. And I actually think we were pretty good in terms of telling the industry, he'll let us do anything we want, so go ask for it. I guess somebody wised up and said, give us Venezuela,
and 25 and 26 for the administration politically has been, next chart, Jacob, the RBOB gasoline. Nope. There you go. We now have $1.74 or thereabouts for current wholesale gasoline prices in the U.S., and I've argued for a long time, despite the fact that gasoline prices are, on an inflation-adjusted basis, significantly reasonable, if not down from where they were 20 years ago, this still matters because it's so evident. And
it's the only real weekly scorecard that the
vast majority of the electorate sees it every day.
Yeah.
Right.
And you drive past a gas station.
I did see something. I have time to take a look at it. And it was this continuum of political pain that Rory Johnston tweeted out, commodity contacts guru, who's also been in the hot seat, really digging in on this negative Canadian reaction to what the Venezuelan action implies. But I do think this stuff matters in terms of leading up to the midterms, which happen in November, in that we've got points on the scoreboard that are familiar and visible to everyone. Yeah, I'm paying closer to $2 than I am to $3, at least if you're here in Texas. I filled up the other day for $2.17.
The Dan Pickering test on this and what we potentially ought to do again, because when gasoline prices were peaking a few years ago, we went around and we just bought people gas. And the Dan Pickering test was how often when you pull up to a gas station are the gas pumps on a fixed number, like $15 instead of filling up, right? And I think Dan was on to something that back when you had higher gasoline prices, you saw a lot of $15, $10, $20 instead of fill-ups. And we ought to do some due diligence. And next time you get gasoline, see how many pumps were fill-ups versus a fixed dollar
or
amount.
a specific fixed dollar amount. Yep. And so, the other side of this from the supply element that everybody focuses on, U.S. oil production, we've had, surprising, I think, level of resilience. And we got one comment here a few minutes ago talking about, if I can find it, if you've got it.
So basically, we must talk about the disconnect between the EIA is reporting and the actual numbers coming out of the Texas Railroad Commission. There is no way we are producing more oil now than ever. Granted, October 2024 was the largest month, but since then it has been in steady decline. This needs to be exposed. Everything else is a moot point. This should be front and center.
Yeah, and if you, Jacob, you put up the frac spread graph here, this is oilprice.com. You look at the last year's trend in frac spreads, we've got, an early surge, front-end loaded budgets, completing some wells that may have been drilled at the tail end of
$70
oil. 24, $70 oil. And that's a pretty big drop over the course of the year. Yeah, we've seen a pretty significant and commensurate drop in rig count. But if you look at the EIA data in the last half of last year, the production data, you've seen, we captured kind of a 13.6. We're now trending for the last several months at 13.8. It is a head scratcher because there's a lot of loud voices that are much more directly on the ground, seeing what's going on. And is there something in the EIA's reporting that is perhaps being influenced by the administration's narrative of we want lower oil prices?
Right.
Because I don't particularly believe that we've been able to hang in and had a last kind of push above that 13.5, 13.6 million barrels a day. All of a sudden we're kind of hanging in there at 13.8 million barrels a day. I will give a benefit of the doubt just because, it was about 2018 where you used to be able to tell me, here's the rig count. I'll tell you what production is going to do in 6 months. I could do that math in my head, and it just disconnected there. And it was because these wells kept getting better and better. And I think you and I have talked about this. If you actually look at well improvements, it continued in like 18 and 19, but that was actually... That's high grading.
Well, it was Exxon and Chevron starting to drill in the Permian because they were late comers. So they showed up with the best rock and started having best practices because they'd watched everybody else.
Took them a few reps to get there.
And so while I saw our portfolio kind of peaking in terms of well efficiency, the overall industry kept going up because Chevron and Exxon show up. So I haven't been able to do that math in my head ever since then. I'm willing to say a little bit in the way of improvements, because every time you go talk to a CEO, they will even say over the last 3 to 6 months, we've gotten better.
Yeah,
we're tweaking this, we're tweaking that. It's getting better. It's 4-mile laterals now. It's horseshoe laterals now. We're seeing, good performance from that. And So I'm willing to go, okay, we've dropped frac spreads, but we're staying flat. Some of that's performance, but
some of it's timing. Some of it's timing.
To some of it's timing, but to your point, this has got to give.
At a fundamental level, it feels like it's got to give.
It's got to give, yeah.
And the thing that's looming out there is that, and if you watch the news flow over the weekend post the capture of Maduro, there were a lot of technical experts coming out of the social media woodwork. And I think in the mainstream, there's this notion that, and good on them for playing it, it's another kind of narrative or headline lid on what Trump wants to deliver on, which is lower oil prices, lower gasoline prices. The fundamentals seemingly are more disconnected than they've been in a while in terms of inventories, in terms of, frac spreads and the resilience of production. And the notion that, a few 100,000 barrels a day in Venezuela ultimately turns back into early 2000s, 3 million barrels a day, where we were taking on the Gulf Coast in terms of imports from Venezuela, upwards of 2 million barrels a day that went to zero in the mid 2010s. And we're starting to creep some of that back, but it's inconsequential to the heavies that are coming down from Canada. We import a lot from Canada, but on a global basis, if there is a lurking fundamental supply deficit or tightness, the notion that the Permian, which played that gap filler when we had demand growth over the last 10 or 15 years, I just don't think that's going to be there. So what are we missing?
Not at these prices.
Right. Not at these prices, which then again, just forget about all the other, maybe this becomes a special circumstance in Venezuela, which means, I saw some headlines this morning, U.S. oil companies are going to need some guarantees for Venezuela for the types of capital and certainly the security situation, the political situation commercially. So is there going to be a hard pivot in your portfolio allocation, your capital allocation to Venezuela just because things have been cleaned up a little bit in terms of getting Maduro out? It just doesn't happen that fast. And Dave Purcell and I did a deeper dive on Venezuela yesterday. Some of it, the bulk of it technical, but some of it talking about the market and geopolitics, and how companies are ultimately going to be thinking about this.
I mean, I live in a small Texas town named Richmond, and they still celebrate expropriation day down there. So, when the Mexican government took over the oil fields and kicked the Western companies out. So I do think it's a real thing. And if I were sitting on the board of Exxon or BP or any of these big guys, Diamondback for that matter, that may be, and I don't have any insider information there, I'm just, guessing, but going into Venezuela, I would make sure the capital I'm risking is stuff that could go to zero. I would not be betting my company on this.
Or if you're an OFS company, it floats and it, some of it's on wheels.
Yeah.
So you can get out quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
And Exxon has been nationalized or expropriated twice. And Darren Woods made some comments, I forget the forum, back in November, alluding to that and thinking about, kind of a third bite at the apple. It's not a decision that a ConocoPhillips or an Exxon is going to make with any kind of speed. There's a lot of framework to be constructed. I think they mean it when they say some kind of unprecedented guarantee. But this provides tremendous jawboning type of leverage to the Trump administration, because most people understand kind of the unique aspects and the timeline it's going to take to add meaningful production and export capacity back to Venezuela. I mean, the Gulf Coast refining complex is perfectly designed for it. Spent
Yeah.
billions of dollars in capital back, in the early 2000s, because all of the growth going forward at that time, pre-shale, was going to be heavy sour,
Right.
right? And so,
And every day a refiner doesn't have to spend $1 on CapEx. That's a good freaking day for a refiner.
and now we import, 3 to 4 million barrels a day from Canada, from about half that 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. The one thing I want to touch on this kind of year in review, Jacob.
Can I do this real quick just before we leave this and get on the soapbox? Because I've been spending too much time on Facebook with high school friends and all. So I'm going to look into the camera. If you want to get on social media and say, "Oh, this is all about oil," I will say the same thing to you when you tell me that oil is destroying the planet, destroying the climate, and they're evil and all that. Why don't you just fucking stop using it? All right? Just don't use oil. You can put all the oil companies out of business if you'll stop using it. And until you do that, quit populating my Facebook feeds with dumb shit messages like, "Oh, it's all about the oil." Sorry.
Well, there's another solution to your angst, which is just shut down Facebook.
Yeah, just don't go on Facebook. That would be way too adult.
So Jacob, put up the XOP chart, if you would. Put it on the 1 year toggle there at the top of the graph, 1 day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Down to 1 year. Yep.
This is the E&P and OFS heavy, mostly E&P heavy. I don't know
It's been relatively flatter this year than I thought.
It's been a boring year for the equities.
Yeah.
And I think, because there has, with a few exceptions, been a follow through on discipline that's been promised. We don't need to be aggressive with adding capital to, as opposed to taking capital back. I mean, if you think about last quarter, I think it's happened a couple of quarters, Matador has come out with a pretty aggressive message, and the stock's been punished pretty severely. So it's going to be interesting to see coming into Q1 or Q4 reporting and the outlooks. And this upcoming earnings season starts late, and it seems to just bleed into Q1 reporting. We seem to start in late January and go almost to what feels like May. But anyway, the the budgeting with, I think, a slightly to significantly different price deck planning basis for 26 is going to be something interesting to follow. But
So,
the equities were surprisingly boring if you use the XOP as a proxy.
yeah. Is the dividend maybe 3% on that?
It's a
or
little
something?
under 3. I think it's like 2.7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I got one text. Can you say that louder for those in the back of the room? Nice text. Love that. Appreciate it. But sorry, I did drop an F-bomb. I was going to try to be better about that this year.
Haven't got me yet.
There you go.
4+ years.
There you go. Exactly. All right. So what is next in our end of the year review? We talked crude prices, talked gasoline, we talked frac spreads, we talked the stocks, and it was relatively flat. All right, are we going to start grading the Trump administration?
Yeah, this is a rich category of things. We saw the flurry of executive orders. We saw the one big beautiful bill. We saw the
let's step back to like pre-inauguration. We were all fired up about Chris Wright.
Yeah.
Governor Burgum, fired up. I mean, folks that really understood energy.
But if you really thought about it, using the one guiding philosophy that Trump's a low oil price guy, was there going to be anything in drill baby drill that was aligned with kind of the economic framework that
Profitability of the
U.S. oil and
industry.
gas companies need.
Yeah.
I mean, telling you that, really strongly implying I want $50 crude oil, and I'm sure he would want lower, that the way this industry works in the U.S., that was going to be well aligned and there weren't going to be some friction points. And there's no way Burgum and Wright can run a U.S. industry first
Right.
messaging campaign that is really counter to that.
Yeah.
But he got drill baby drill in my own little estimation, and he got it other places like the OPEC arm twisting.
Right.
He's got it with, Venezuela, just from a headline and a perception standpoint. The underlying fundamentals don't show this, what the EIA called a 4 million barrel a day glut in 26 yet, don't show anything near that. But right now the fundamentals don't matter. And I think as long as this headline driven dynamic in the way the commodities are trading, get us to the finish line, at least the intermediate finish line defined as November 26, and hang on to the House and the Senate. I think that's the most important thing. And whatever we have to do, there's no cycle time that's practically doable here to actually make a meaningful difference, to pick up a bunch of rigs either in the U.S. or open the valves back up in Venezuela. That's going to make a fundamental difference.
Well, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I would go back to the drawing board and come up with a 15-point, this is what I want. I want, on federal leases, I want royalty relief, based on sliding oil prices. I want, land use permits, tick on down the list. I want transmission line legislation, et cetera. Because, the practically speaking, and when you look at the betting sites, the Republicans at least lose the House in November. But on the weird chance they actually win, you need to have that list of stuff we want to have codified, because I think that's a fair ask of Trump is, hey man, we took it in the shorts on this $50 oil. Profitability wasn't great. Our stock prices didn't move any. But hey, we're all Americans. We did good for America. We need these 15 things. Please introduce a bill. And we're just not doing that as an industry. We're just sitting around griping about oil price.
Yeah, and I think the cynical reality that I've pointed out multiple times over the course of the last 18 months is the electoral significance of the industry relative to the general population is not enough to have a pivot by Trump that says, okay, we need to protect the U.S. oil and gas industry. They need better kind of economic circumstances. We're going to address the things that we can address from a regulatory standpoint. But again, those are things that don't, that's not a go, no go kind of lever on, the budgeting and capital allocation decisions that U.S. oil and gas companies make when you've got low 6 or 5 handle crude. That's
yeah. I the libertarian in me can't bring myself to ask for a floor of some sort, but I do think there are a lot of things we could be asking for. All right. So let's run through the Trump administration. We came in with much pomp and applause for at least the team, and if you're a Republican, I think you were like very pumped up about the cabinet and who was being appointed where. It felt like this was definitely Team Trump. If you were anti-Trump, you hated the folks, but you would hate whoever he nominated. So let's start with, the number one issue in the campaign was
pass, fail, incomplete grade at this point, 1 year in.
Yeah. So the number one issue in the campaign was immigration, and just basically we lived 4 years with open borders under Biden, and how do we grade the Trump administration there?
Yeah, I'd give it a pass for the semester, but this is a multi-semester course, because we're seeing the things with, certainly ICE and the deportations. You had the killing yesterday in Minnesota, and so, but I think the more important thing about what was the top issue in the election and early in the year is that it has moved way down as it relates to what's next on voters' minds, which I would argue is affordability. We finally started to make the distinction between rates of inflation and affordability.
Right.
I don't know anywhere in your experience over the last year where you've seen a meaningful price reduction other than in gasoline. And
nothing. I mean, insurance is up.
Insurance is up.
Food prices,
protein staples are up.
Well, it's not that they're up. It's just, it's cumulative, right? And so when you go through 4 years where you have an 8% inflation rate and a 9% inflation rate, cumulatively, the price is high. It hasn't gone negative.
Right. And that's the affordability. Okay.
Yes.
It's not increasing as much.
Right.
But it hasn't come down.
It hasn't come down. And coming down's hard. I mean, usually
of course it is, especially where you have, you're able to price discriminate.
I mean, how many times would you, like, on your salary of, hey, let's drop your salary $50,000 a year, that doesn't happen. The one thing, just back on immigration, is this a fair point? I think what the American electorate has told us is, hey, we don't want an open border. We don't want unvetted people coming through. That being said, people that are here and quote unquote good people, contributors, we don't want them kicked out. We're okay kicking out kind of violent criminals, but there's some sort of détente there. Where I think contributors are okay. I think the hard thing is just in the reality of, how do you actually do that? How do you go in and arrest someone that, has a conviction for rape or murder or something like that, and not grab their mother too, who's in the house with them and has been a nanny for 25 years and by all intents and purposes a really good person. It's tricky to do this.
Here's a thesis or a concept that I've shared with a few personally. I agree with you. You've got millions who have been here and established and are contributing. Fundamentally, or initially, the act of entering the country illegal did break a law, and in most cases where there's not, if I understand the statutes, in most cases, those, are essentially misdemeanors. But you did cut in line.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, is there a process whereby you get some penalty tacked on to your ability to then make the next step to citizenship?
Yeah,
because you did cut in front of the line, right, ahead of those that are going through legal immigration channels. So that's not as disruptive. And then there are, so after a certain period of time, that misdemeanor is done with, or maybe it's not even acknowledged. And then you've got, you've got some normalization, or you've made it fairer to those who have been waiting for a long time to go, which it's obviously an inherently protracted process. I think
it's a broken system.
It is a broken system.
I think we can all say.
But is there some kind of reset that makes it fair for those who, are attempting to and have been waiting a long time to go through the legal immigration process? Yeah, law-abiding residents who've been here for a long time and are contributing and not scamming the system like we're seeing in some areas. I think from a practical standpoint, from just a human being standpoint or a humanity standpoint, there is some workable solution here that would be fair to those, like I said, in the legal immigration channels, in terms of putting everybody kind of at the same starting point.
The one little nuance that I want to point out, just to make sure we're truly saying, because I am not unsympathetic to people that sit there and say, oh, you're breaking up a family by deporting this family. All they did was come here and they're undocumented and all that. Just recognize, if that's where we are, you are telling me that Donald Trump gets to be the arbiter on which laws are enforced and which laws aren't. So be really careful if you want to go there. If that's the snarky thing I want to do on Facebook, but I don't, is, okay, just tell me which laws we have to follow, which laws we don't have to follow. When do we have to obey the police? When do we not obey the police?
Right.
And it is a very, very slippery slope type thing. Because I will say this, the only party in my adulthood that's ever had a filibuster-proof majority was the Democrats. So if the Democratic Party doesn't like the law, they're the ones that had the window where they could jam anything they wanted on us, and they didn't. So, all right, let's go into wars. And obviously Russia, Ukraine.
I mean, is it fair to call it a fail?
Yeah, I mean, it's
or I should say failing grade. I hate the tendency to use verbs as nouns, like the big fail, the big reveal.
Yeah,
that's just. Yeah, I look. You set a pretty aggressive expectation.
I'd be done with it in 30 days or whatever.
Yeah, I think 24 hours, and he backed away from that, saying, look, that was me being facetious. Not so sure.
Yeah. No, I do think it's fair for him to say this war wouldn't have happened if I would have been president. I think that's a fair thing to say. You just get to say it once. You don't get to say it for a whole year, It's kind of like, all right, you've said it once, move on.
It's not been resolved, but I'll remind you that there wouldn't have been a war had I, been in power.
Yeah. That being said, I think the underappreciated thing that Putin did is he really, really kind of sanction-proofed his economy in anticipation of this.
Yeah.
And I mean, could we have done harsher sanctions and potentially put more pressure on him? Maybe. But quite frankly, the best thing you're going to do, if you're just looking at it purely through the lens of war, $50 oil. I mean, that's going to be the lever that gets him.
Yeah.
So, all right. Israel, Hamas.
I'd say incomplete.
I'd say incomplete as well, but I will say more progress has been made there than in my lifetime.
For sure.
Yeah, this feels like I would much rather be here than not.
No question.
I do think it was a game changer to well, let me add this. I think one thing that we have not said enough, just because all we do is yay Trump or boo Trump, being so divided. I think anyone that's intellectually honest needs to look at the proficiency of our military today and go, holy shit, wow, we're really good at this. I mean, the bunker buster bombing of Iran, the bombing of Nigeria, even if you think it's illegal, just the military being able to go in and grab Maduro, our operations. I mean, blowing up these drug boats, again, you may think it's illegal. Fine. I'm just saying the actual precision of what we're doing with this feels night and day different than withdrawing from Afghanistan and leaving all the equipment and service members being killed. It feels like we're playing a different game these days.
Yeah, I mean the example over the past weekend was breathtaking.
Yeah, stunning.
Yeah, and
so taking out Chavez's mausoleum is just great. I don't care, even if you think it's illegal. That's so awesome.
Yeah, I missed that, and you know, it's. I guess we could argue is that something that
was it petty or not?
It petty or not?
But you know, the communists use symbols like that.
Oh, sure.
You know, and so. Desecrating the symbol is a symbol back, you know. So
the fact that we had perfect execution of this raid and we still had time to do that, like take an extra shot, you know, we can take a shot at some of the symbolism here,
right? Yeah,
is pretty badass,
and the fact that somebody thought of it too. All right, let's
and I guess. I'm just thinking about this now, going back to Israel and Hamas. The incomplete, I think, has a little, if not a lot, to do with ultimately, does Iran get resolved?
Yeah. Does Hamas actually?
I think if
down?
that happens, it is a resounding pass. And you know, I don't know if you've seen in the news feeds around, we're seeing a lot of kind of public demonstration in Tehran that you know suggests that you know maybe they're feeling a little bit more surrounded in the regime. So we'll see what happens. But
all the other wars, I think it's been pretty impressive, or at least feels like as a longtime observer of foreign policy of you know simmering tensions around the rest of the world and doing it with basically U.S. economic pressure. Hey, you don't get to trade with us anymore if you guys don't figure it out. You know, so you had India and Pakistan and the couple of issues going on in Africa where you had peace settlements signed, you know, in the Oval Office. I think I'm gonna show my bias here, but I think little Marco's been as good as anyone I've seen.
I've gotten endless amusement out of the memes that keep getting repeated, particularly the one where he's, you know, sitting there kind of slumped in his chair, but he's dressed in upland hunting gear, and he's the new governor of Minnesota.
Right. Well, I actually read an interesting article, and just the punchline to the article was one of the reasons he's been incredibly effective as Secretary of State is because he wears multiple hats. So, you know, you've got, because he's national security advisor, he's this, he's that. And because he controls all that, a lot of previous secretaries of states get blindsided, get undercut by competing factions, and he doesn't have it.
Right.
Because
he is those things.
He is
all the factions.
He is all the factions. And so in a weird sort of way.
One of the things before we get to Venezuela, which I think is certainly a pass for this semester scorecard, but one thing that I'm surprised I didn't put on the list, and we don't really need to get deep into it, is tariffs.
Yeah.
I did see something this morning that the U.S. trade deficit's at a 16-year low.
Yeah.
How would you grade?
So I don't think we've talked about this a little bit, but you know, Trump's whole thing is they pay the tariffs, and everybody's like, no, technically we pay the tariffs. Yes, that's right. But if you have a factory overseas, you will run that factory where your variable revenue minus your variable cost is zero. And if you are tariffed such that will you take an increase in your variable, or will you take a decrease in your variable revenue to maintain your market share? When you have a factory and stuff like that, yes, you will. And that's why we're seeing relatively low inflation, even though we've put the tariffs in place. I wish we were a little more surgical in nature in this. It feels like we're just hitting everything with the broad hammer, and we were a little more thoughtful about it. But maybe behind the scenes we are being more thoughtful about it. I mean, I don't know that we've had a Secretary of Treasury that's as sharp as Scott Bassett. I mean, dude's a rock star in terms of just being smart and thoughtful. So, but no, it hasn't been as bad. Trump's right in that we do have pressure. I will tell you this, living through a pandemic where I couldn't get toilet paper, I've become less a free trader, and some protectionism is warranted so that we can produce things at home. So,
yeah, let's jump back into Venezuela. I talked a lot about it yesterday, but I want to hear your thoughts. But we do have one comment. It says Venezuela is more about controlling Cuba and kicking out China and keeping the training of terrorists from Iran. And one of the things that we've talked about, at least for the last 2 years, as we've had geopolitical focus pretty heavily on Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, Iran, is that we're seeing things. We have, I think, a much more heightened awareness of what was unfolding in Venezuela relative to the security destabilization that was potentially going to be the result of, this political vacuum or this isolation that Venezuela is. I mean, hell, they're right here in our backyard. Now you got the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians being opportunistic, not to mention the cartels. And so not enough attention in my mind was being paid to that security threat. And maybe it's a little appreciation and analogizing with history about what happened in Cuba in the early 60s, if you know that history of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that threat of having a toehold of being able to destabilize in the Western Hemisphere, I think was underemphasized because we were distracted by a lot of really important stuff over to the eastern part of the world.
Yep.
And so now that was my first thought when I saw news of the raid on Saturday.
It's gonna sound like I'm changing the topic here, but I'm not, because I think it's all interrelated and it comes back. I think one of the underappreciated moments of 2025 was when China said, no, you can't have any more precious minerals. I do think maybe for the first time we have taken that seriously of, holy crap, we need to do something about this. So we've got to deal with Ukraine to grab minerals out of there. And what brought this up to me and made me think about this last night is I had Kyle Reynolds. He and I recorded a BDE yesterday just about current plight of landmen and compensation structures and all. And AAPL puts on NAPE, right?
Right.
So tell me what's going on at NAPE. They're actually going to have a section of NAPE this year on precious earth minerals and mining, because lithium is being mined out of the Smackover. We've seen Exxon. We've talked about that on BDE. So I do think we have seen the United States take seriously, and part of that is defending our backyard. China, Russia, get the hell out of the Western hemisphere. And I do think that's probably a really good thing. And
sure.
So I mean, this is big time national security type stuff, and unfortunately, we kind of have to do some of these things.
Yeah, and one of the things when you went off on your Facebook rant that I thought you were the track I thought you were on was the point you've made repeatedly is, there is a real personal drug motivation that is core to Trump's life experience and philosophy.
Yeah,
so kind of reiterate that for us.
Yeah, no, I mean his
and I believe that.
Yeah, no, I believe that too. And anyone that doubts that, oh, you're just a sycophant for Trump or whatever, go watch Trump's podcast with Theo Vaughn, where Trump is legitimately asking Theo Vaughn about his drug use and stuff. And there is a level of humanity there and vulnerability that you just don't see with Donald Trump. But you could tell that's really striking a chord, because at the end of the day, his older brother, his hero, died of alcoholism, and there were probably drugs involved too. You go back and look at videos of Donald Trump back when he's a celebrity, The Apprentice and stuff like that, and interviewing him with his kids. He's always lecturing his kids about don't do drugs. And, claims he's never had
drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes.
Yeah, and tattoos.
Yeah.
And he also says tattoos, but, claims he's never had a drink of alcohol, never done a drug and stuff. And I truly think that is a real thing for him. I mean, you see some interviews with people whose children have OD'd and stuff, and they've talked to the president about it. And even if they hate President Trump, they come away with saying he really cares and he says he's going to do something. And drug deaths are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, significantly. So I think that's a real thing.
So we'll have the piece I alluded to earlier out, talking a little bit more in depth about Venezuela, both from a technical and just a market and geopolitical.
Perfect.
Jamie says tomorrow.
Jamie says tomorrow.
He's Jamie.
That's funny.
Temporarily.
Yeah, we can throw out Kyle next week or something. But
so before we get into the look ahead, I'm just going to read some comments that we've gotten. The efficiency aspect is a fallacy.
Okay, fair enough.
The EIA is using surveys, no doubt.
Okay.
These surveys are with companies that have to show that production is up. If not, their stocks will drop.
See, I don't believe that anymore. I don't know that production growth and rates are really mattering into stock prices these days.
Same person. So this is a series of 4 rapid fire comments. I voted for Trump, but I just want the truth.
Oh, wow.
And then he said he would do it. How could he possibly do that without manipulation of the markets? And I don't know the context there, but I assume get oil prices down.
Yeah.
How do you do it without manipulating the market? I think he's doing it through a lot of narrative and headline.
Well, and pushing allies to pump more.
Because $1.74 wholesale gasoline translates to kind of low twos on the retail side. One thing about low prices is we consume more.
Yeah. No, that's right.
All things being equal, absent, recessionary type factors. And I don't think we're there right now, but, anyway, so, all right, let's,
the one thing we didn't touch on that maybe we should just real quick is, kudos to Trump for getting rid of all these renewable subsidies and stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, as much as I watch the contortions of people saying it's so much better, it's so much cheaper. Why do you need the subsidies? Because we need them. I mean, it's
yeah. And look, alongside that, the executive orders related to transmission, nuclear, et cetera, are, I think, very constructive.
Yeah.
And,
come on, Congress, codify it.
Europe has quickly followed with softening, if not rollback, of their ICE ban a la California.
Right.
Right. So, and then we have, we have a number of the leading voices really coming back to reality, and that's namely, and you knew you couldn't get away with this episode without me bringing up the EIA.
Right, exactly.
So it wasn't that long ago that they were predicting peaking fossil fuels before or by 2030.
Yeah.
And now we need a whole bunch more reinvestment that we haven't been doing because we don't see a peak. Now they're still below where, say, the OPEC long-range forecasts are, but you haven't seen kind of much in the way of digging in to those things, because reality has shown, the data have shown that those were just fantastical notions to begin with, at least in the time frame of transitioning energy systems. And I think we've made tremendous progress in kind of leading us back the other way as from a political standpoint, pulling out of Paris, doing the things that we've done in subsidy rollbacks and renewables. And, the reality is, if you look at, why is a grid like PJM continuing to slam up against its price caps in every auction?
Yeah.
They've got a generation problem, and there are embedded in that, and ERCOT's got the same problem where we've seen the unraveling of we've seen significant withdrawals of gas-fired projects out of the Texas Energy Fund, because in ERCOT, thermal is still second-class citizen compared to new renewables projects.
Right.
And so as a risker of capital for a speculative, certainly in a peaker, you're not going to see any kind of gas-fired generation built on spec. I don't think anything to a meaningful degree. And what has happened to the Texas Energy Fund in terms of it having a number of projects pulled, I think is indicative of that.
Yeah. And I still go back, and I believe this in my heart of hearts. You can't tell me that energy companies are so greedy and all about profit and then tell me they would choose to do something that's less profitable.
Right.
I.e., if renewables really are more profitable, they don't give a shit. I'll go put in solar panels instead of drilling for oil or drilling for natural gas.
Like the famous
I honestly don't care.
Tommy Norris monologue from season 1, where he's out with Rebecca around the wind turbines.
Yeah.
Said, if Exxon thought they could make money doing these, they'd be putting them up all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a little more colorful and entertaining description of what Exxon would do in that case.
I don't think either one of us can pull off Billy Bob. He's pretty good. So, all right, we got a couple of minutes left. We're going to rapid fire predictions because, unfortunately with this being on Clyde, people can search it.
Yeah.
So, number one, U.S. production predictions. Okay, I was wrong in 2025 because didn't I call the peak in February or March of this year?
Did.
I did. I called the peak, and where were we there? 13.5 maybe? Somewhere. Yeah. And we're hitting 13.8. So I was wrong.
At least on paper.
I was wrong. So I'll go first. Production this year. So if we're at 13.8 right now, we end the year at 13.3.
So half million barrels a day, exit to exit.
Exit to exit.
Yeah, I'm directionally in line with that. I'm not sure I'd call it 500,000 barrels a day, but the plateau will be evident either through a combination of revisions to EIA data or just showing up in kind of the inventory calibrations of the monthly 914 reports. I just don't think we can overcome and much less grow from here if those numbers are directionally accurate with the restricted capital and activity environment that we have now been in for certainly well over a year, going on 2 years. I mean, rig count,
If
well-directed rig count peaked in 2022.
Yeah.
And we've been on a bleed since then. We're now back down to levels that are equivalent to trough seen in 21. I don't know how that compares on the frac spread side. And again, watching what and listening to what the companies say about the budgeting outlook and the activity outlook for 2026, I think is going to be telling, despite the fact that the stocks continue to be boring.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what, kind of 5-6 handle crude does relative to 7. So I'll take.
Somebody actually pointed out Chuck's already blown his F-bomb New Year's resolution. At least he got the most out of it. I do like that comment. Thank you, Jason. That's very appreciated. All right. So are you going to give me a number? Where do we exit the year? What's U.S. production? I'm at 13.3.
Well, I think after all the revisions and adjustments that, I did more believe the 13.5 than the 13.8 as a peak.
Okay.
And so I think on an absolute basis, we're going to be in the 13.3 to 13.4 areas as an exit. And we may already be there.
So oil and gas prices. I went first last time, so you have to go first this time.
I think we're closer to a 7 handle than a 6 handle.
So as we speak,
because underlying fundamentals are, I think, stronger than are evident.
So oil right now we are at 57.06, and you're saying we're flirting around with at least high 60s.
I think on an exit basis we'll be $10 higher.
$10 higher. All right. I am going to say that Trump's going to do everything humanly possible to keep prices low, including having the Saudis pump more, etc. I think we exit the year right about where we are now. So we're gonna have a relatively flat year. On that natural gas, we are currently, as we speak, at 341 for Henry Hub. Where do we exit the year?
Gas always scares me because of rising GORs.
Yeah, I've totally missed the associated gas story, early days of the shale oil boom.
Yeah, so I don't.
It's disconnected in my mind. It used to be like, what's the weather? And now we don't even talk about the weather anymore.
Optimistically, we are where we are right now. So I think flat exit to exit. Right. And a lot's got to go right to support that because the gas volumes are.
Yeah, if I believe my own BS that we're down 500,000 barrels a year, and maybe instead of 3.5, we're at, or 13.5, we're at 13, or 13.8, we're at 13.3. Maybe we're at $4 gas. Although the
400 would be nice.
Man, the Haynesville can deliver.
Unless you're buying gas-fired power.
Yes, exactly. All right. So what happens in the midterms?
You get to start on this one.
Yeah. I mean, we've got, I will do my predictions this way. It is a much more arduous task for the Republicans to hold on to the House and the Senate. If they do, it will be because the stimulus of the lower tax rates, because everybody over withheld for taxes this year. So there are going to be a bunch of tax rebates on April 15th. So that stimulus coming back, I think it's going to require some sustained good luck on the international front. Venezuela doesn't melt down into a civil war. Hamas and Iran stay at bay, etc. And I do think there has to be kind of one other, and it's going to be unpredicted, but just good, feel good type of thing, and I don't even know what an example would be to give, but it's literally going to take. I mean, you're sitting there needing all the cards through the river to be able to win this hand if you're the Republicans. So let's give it an 80% shot. The Dems take the House, 50-50. The Dems take the House and the Senate, and the Republicans are going to have to play it perfect. And I just worry that they don't. That, you know, unless they have a cure for insurance rates and healthcare, which we haven't seen out of the Republicans. I mean, I think it's horribly unfair that the Republicans get criticized for healthcare when there's literally never been a Republican vote in the Senate that has anything to do with healthcare law. So it's totally a Democrat creation, but the Republicans can be held at fault for, you haven't given me your solution.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I think
that was not a lightning round prediction. That's
all right,
but whatever.
It's complicated. I think there's 10 months between Venezuela and midterm election day. I think there's 6.5 months between tax refunds and election day. And despite the fact that a strong delivery right out of the gate on immigration, I thought, well, this is enough. This is going to be enough, along with energy prices or oil and gas prices, gasoline prices, that bow wave will carry at least to the midterms. I remember thinking last year, in the first weeks and months of the administration, that it's, there's enough to point to on voter priorities, which have changed.
Yeah.
Affordability is now the chief issue. Bring up another good one in healthcare, and the party in power is going to get blamed.
Yeah.
And so there's just kind of a pendulum swing vote that, here we are with a gridlocked Congress because the House is controlled by the party out of executive power and the Senate is the obstructionist. And so I don't know what that rabbit out of the hat thing is between now and midterm elections, but I would, based upon so far the administration's ability to do those things, kind of shock and awe, I'd put that at about 60-40.
Okay.
In favor of the Dems taking the House in November. And a year ago, I would have said 80-20, if not higher, that this momentum that got established early was going to carry straight through.
I mean, the key element is, does the Trump voter show up if Trump's not on the ballot? And so being able to, if he's able, so one of the greatest political things I saw in my life as it got, ridiculed at the time, but Newt Gingrich's contract with America, actually, the Republicans always did well in the presidential elections. If you look back, Reagan won, and before that, you had Nixon, et cetera. But they always did horribly. The Democrats controlled the House for 50 years, something like that, straight. And the contract with America, for the first time, nationalized a congressional race and got it out of kind of the local issues, and they were able to do it. So if Trump can put himself on the ballot somehow for the midterm elections, and I don't think it's powerful enough to say that, hey, all they're going to do is impeach me. I don't think that's enough, but maybe if he's able to do that's the thing that kind of comes out, that one more good thing the Republicans are going to have happen.
So what could put him on the ballot in the midterms?
I mean, if he decides to campaign day to day, go work at a McDonald's, go drive a garbage truck, and if things are going relatively well in the economy, you can do it. If not, you look insensitive.
Yeah.
And and for as great a campaigner as he has, you can hate him, but he is a really good campaigner. I think that's his blind spot.
All right. Last category is global conflicts.
I mean, who would have thought we'd have what happened so far this year. I mean, we've had a lot of flare-ups, a lot of initiatives on our part, and it feels like we're relatively more peaceful today than when Trump took over worldwide, Ukraine, Russia notwithstanding.
Yeah, that was the subset of that. Does Russia Ukraine get solved this year?
Yeah.
In your mind?
It kind of feels like Zelensky's given up. You know, he's willing to cut a deal. Trump's obviously willing to cut a deal. It all comes down to Putin, and I just have no way of reading Putin.
I don't think it matters for the midterms. It's kind of down the electorate, and he can say, "Look, we did all these other things in terms of I've kind of got. If I'm a baseball player, I've got a batting average that's Hall of Fame type numbers.
Right.
So this stuff's hard.
Yep.
If he hadn't put it out there so aggressively in terms of having a clear line of sight to a short-term resolution, then we're not even talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be on the agenda for the midterms as far as most electors consider. Iran's going to be the big one, and is there a knock-on effect in Cuba? That's immediately evident between now and midterms. I think might get some airplay.
Yeah.
And matter a little bit more than whether or not Russia-Ukraine gets solved. I don't want to be insensitive to that because Trump was talking the other day. He said, look, we had, I think the number was like 3,000 people killed, mostly combatants, the soldiers. And, he's just very consistently been saying this is about, I want a deal that stops the killing of young people.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much like, and you can be cynic, you can call me a Trump sycophant. I do believe that is a very deeply and personally held conviction as it relates to.
He's always been that way.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back to the Donahue show in the 80s. He's always been anti-war. He was against the first Gulf War when Bush let us in. I mean, he was very public and adamant about it. So
okay.
All righty.
Well, this was fun. Thanks for everybody that participated and commented and asked questions.
Sorry we went long, Clyde. Sorry we started late. But anyway, good to have you guys around. If you like the show, definitely share it with a friend. And final comment?
No, I think we covered it. There is no glut. Was the gist of the comment. So
yeah, no, I mean, and my whole point is, if prices start easing up, Trump has a lot of levers he can play, at least over the short term, with more supply.
Right.
Didn't have going into Venezuela on my radar screen.
Get it?
Look at that.
Oh, we can pencil whip another 200,000 barrels a day out of the Permian in the EIA, to be totally cynical, but
there we go. All right, Clyde. Good seeing you guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.